to be able to see everybody. Shabbat Shalom. So it's been a tough week. It's been a tough week watching the news, hearing everything that truckers have decided to do. What they're doing in Ottawa, what they're doing in Windsor, what they're doing at the border, what they're planning or threatening to do in Toronto, and it's just daily. And we hear it, and we've been hearing it, and it's tough, and it's ongoing. We watch the levels of government not responding quickly, and we're watching, and we're watching, and we're waiting, and we're waiting, and we wonder, what's the delay? What's going on? And part of the problem sits in the fact that we're Canadian. And so we're looking at it, and we're listening to it, and we're watching it, and we're waiting. We have our way of doing things. One of the ways we do things is to always be respectful and polite toward each other, to always respect autonomy, to invite someone in free speech, because we have laws about hate speech. So we know that we're safe in the free speech zone. And that's how we do things, and that's how we always do things. I remember about 20 years ago, there was a beer commercial. It was brilliant. Molson Canadian put this beer commercial up, and it had someone standing there, and for anyone who remembers it, it became known as the Canadian Rant. It's one person standing there in a flannel lumberjack shirt, and he simply starts talking and says, "Hey, I'm not a lumberjack or a fur trader. I don't live in an igloo or eat blubber or own a dog sled. And I don't know Jimmy, Sally, or Susie from Canada, although I'm certain they're really, really nice. I have a prime minister, not a president. I speak English and French, not American. And I pronounce it about, not about. I can proudly sew my country's flag on my backpack. I believe in peacekeeping, not policing. Diversity, not assimilation. And that the beaver is truly a proud and noble animal. A toque is a hat, a Chesterfield is a couch, and it is pronounced Z, not C, Z. Canada is the second largest landmass, the first nation of hockey, and the best part of North America. My name is Joel, and I am Canadian." It was a beer commercial. It became extremely popular. It did way more than anybody thought it would ever do. It boosted sales. That's why Molson did it. Beer sales were dropping. And they were being beaten out by imported beer, so they decided to do something that declares their beer Canadian. And it worked, and it was brilliant, and it was popular, and it was beautiful. And actually, I'm not saying it right. I can't say it the way that it was said in the commercial, because I was taught not to raise my voice at people. I was taught that Canadians talk to each other politely. We don't yell, we don't raise our voices, and we don't get in your face. But the person doing that rant did all of those things. His voice got louder and louder as he progressed. By the end, he was shouting what he was saying, and it was hugely strong in terms of in your face. In fact, that's part of the irony of the whole thing. At the time, the Ontario Minister of Consumer Affairs, who you would think would be really happy because the sales just boosted, he was not happy. At that time, he came out and criticized it and said, "I don't like it." And here's why he said he doesn't like it. He said, "Canadians don't show national pride by yelling at Americans." This is the quote. "I'm certainly as pro-Canadian as anyone, but I don't think you have to kick anyone in the shins to do that." End quote. So what he was saying is the irony of the "I am Canadian" statement is no Canadian would say that. We wouldn't say it that way. We wouldn't get in someone's face. We wouldn't be yelling and raising our voices about how we are Canadian. It's a statement of being Canadian that isn't Canadian. So we looked at it and we realized, wow, as Canadians, we have our way. We know how we do things. We recognize it when we see it. We understand reaction when we see the Canadian way of doing things. When Nancy Reagan was First Lady in the United States, and she took her cause of the war against drugs, and she said, "Just say no to drugs." We can boil it down to that, just saying no to drugs. And I remember my friends, we sat up here in Canada, my friends and I, and we looked at each other after a while and said, you know, that would never work here. We would never be able to say, just say no to drugs in Canada, because we would have to say, just say no, thank you. that there was something about that communication that we sat in Canada and said, I would never say that. I've been taught to say please and thank you. We joke about it, but it's who we are. One time I remember that I said excuse me to an Israeli when he bumped into me. He then turned to me and said, I bumped into you. You said excuse me. I said, oh, yes, sorry. He then looked at me and said, you're from Canada, aren't you? We have our way. This is how we go about. This is what we do. And again, we joke about it, but we're also very proud of it. It took us a long time to get here. It took a lot of dialogue and discourse and all kinds of relationships with diversity and with multiculturalism to get here, to say this is our way. Yesterday, Doug Ford put his foot down about it. He said, demonstration in Ottawa, it's now, quote, an illegal occupation. He said Ottawa has, quote, devolved into a siege. Listen to that language. Oh my goodness, that's the language of warfare. And then he proceeded to say, I am now telling everyone in Ottawa and everyone at the border, please go home. And I noticed it immediately. The please was important because he's responding as someone we elected. He's responding from within the system we are comfortable with. And so we're watching the response. It's our way. We say no thank you to drugs, and we say please to illegal occupations. That is our way. And we're watching it, and now we understand that's what's actually bothering us is not that they're saying what they're saying, it's what they're doing. Nobody voted for truckers. Nobody appointed them as the spokespeople. We're troubled by how they're doing what they're doing, because we're sitting there saying, but that's not our way. That's not how we do that. You go and you express yourself a day, maybe two. This is 2 weeks later, what are you doing? And we're stumped. And we're watching our elected officials, and now we're starting to hear the Canadian response. What's very interesting is that in this way, our Canadian identities and our Jewish identities actually speak to each other very well. There's a new Jewish expression about being on the derech, on the path. Often it's used in Orthodox communities to say, you're on the derech, meaning you're on the right Jewish observant path. You're on the derech. And I remember once there was a young man talking to me. He was one of my students, and he said, you know, my parents go to a very Orthodox shul, and I've been raised, and I know that as a young man in that shul, I can wear black and white. That's about it. He said, but I don't, outside of being with my parents, I wear colored shirts, I wear a colored tie, so I decided I'm going to wear it to shul, and something very interesting happened. I said, what happened? He said, I got an aliyah. I said, really? He said, yeah, I got an aliyah. So I decided to test it out. When I wear black and white, I don't get an aliyah. When I wear a colored shirt, I get an aliyah. So he decided to ask his parents, and he said, did you notice? And they said, of course. And he said, why? They said, because the Gabai's worried you're off the derech. If you're wearing colors, oh my goodness, what's going to happen next? We got to get him up on the bima next to the Torah, holding the thing, having an aliyah. The colors will stop. He's off the derech. We do understand in each of our communities and each of our homes that our Jewish identities tell us this is our way. We have a way we do things. The Torah this week gives us minusha. When you read that entire chapter of the clothing, the layers, the breastplate, the engraving, the jewels, the epaulets, the hat, oh my God, our head is spinning. And we haven't even started on those sacrifices, the biology lesson that's going to go on with those sacrifices, about what you have to do with the innards and the liver and the kidney and the lungs and the goodness. God help any person who would rely on me, because I'm challenged when I clean chicken. I mean, this is, the minutia of all of this is unusual even for the Torah. So we look at it and we think, why are we doing that? Especially when, in fact, we don't sacrifice anymore, but we're still going to read it and we still want it. We want it, we want the minutia, we want the details, because it's our way. We're going to enter those details. We're going to step into them. We're going to explore the colors that have been told to us, because not all those colors are the same. Some of them absorb other colors. Some of them refract in light. Some of them do not. Some of them repel other colors. We want those details. Why those colors? What is that telling us about the priest and the priesthood, that it's those colors? Why is each tribe going to have a specific jewel with a specific color? We want those details. It's who we are. It's what we do. It's how we do what we do. We're looking at the body parts that are being described to us in the sacrifices, and it speaks of our relationships. How I create agency through a food chain to express my bond with others. Everything I do when I approach food is meaningful Jewishly. And I want to know the details. And I want to understand the symbols. I want it. I want the layers. And then the arguing starts. And we're going to debate. And we're going to discourse. And we're discoursing the details because that's our way. That's how we'll find the derech. That's how we'll find our way. One time I had to do some work with a Métis elder. She was a wonderful woman. And we had a deadline, and I had to explain to her that I will not answer the phone after sundown on Friday until nighttime on Saturday. So she should be aware of that. There will be that delay in terms of our working. She was quiet for a moment, and here's what she said to me. Oh, yes, she said, you honor the path of your ancestors. And I thought, yes, I do. And it was a moment when she said it. I never thought about it that way. And it was the only way she could think about it. And I realized that is exactly what that is. And I was so humbled by that statement, and I carry it very preciously with me, the moment she said it. It's interesting. It's Darkenu. It's our way. But we don't use that language with our kids. When we speak to our kids, we become the teachers that tell them, do this, don't do that. And then we don't add because it's not our way. To be able to say to our children, to our grandchildren, to our great-grandchildren, to everybody who's growing up, we have Darkenu, we have our way. And I want that language in the home, to be able to say that's not our way. And to develop an understanding of that, and a comfort with that, and the boundaries and the expression of it. In the end, we got where we needed to go. Ford said, please. But then he said, hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines, up to a year in jail. We will start arresting people. And now we're waiting and watching with our eyes on our elected officials saying, do what you have to do in our Canadian way, but get us there. So we watch because we know what feels right. We know when it's the right fit. And likewise, as Jews, we have Darkenu. We know the way we do it. We know what feels right. We know when it's the right fit. There's an Israeli popular song that says, Lo kala hi lo kala Darkenu. Our way is never easy. We know it. But the Torah never told us it would be easy. The Torah told us it would fit. We would know it. We would find ourselves in it. So we know that in the end we get where we need to get, but we insist we're going to do it in our way, B'Darkenu. Shabbat Shalom.